The more you chase happiness, the more it eludes you. Happiness is not a goal, it's a byproduct of a life well lived. Eleanor Roosevelt. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it and let's get started. They told you happiness is a goal, a finish line, something you reach once everything else is in place. Once you earn enough, once you fix your flaws, once the chaos settles and the sun finally rises over your perfect life. But that sunrise never comes, because the more you run toward it, the more it moves away. Like a dream that vanishes the moment you try to touch it. Modern life has turned happiness into a product. It has been packaged, advertised, and sold. A car, a vacation, a wedding, a body, a brand. Happiness has become an image, edited, filtered, choreographed. We scroll through curated lives, wondering why ours doesn't look like theirs, wondering what we're missing. But we are not missing anything. We are simply being lied to. The lie is quiet but persistent. It whispers that joy is outside of us, that peace lives in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next level of success, that happiness must be earned, that it is conditional. And so, we chase it. We build our lives around the pursuit. We work more, buy more, show more. We smile through exhaustion. We perform satisfaction. We rehearse gratitude, all in the name of an invisible prize. But the prize keeps moving. The system feeds on our discontent. It needs us hungry. It needs us comparing. It needs us insecure. Because a satisfied person is dangerous. A person who is present, truly present, cannot be manipulated, cannot be sold illusions, cannot be pulled away from themselves. So we are taught to leave the present, to abandon this breath, this body, this moment. We are dragged into imagined futures, haunted by polished pasts. We are told that now is not enough, that we are not enough, and that is the wound. We begin to believe that life begins later, after we fix ourselves, after we become someone better, after we earn the right to be happy. But life is not waiting. It is here, in this second, in the space between one breath and the next, in the stillness of a morning, in the ache of being alive, in the eyes of someone who truly sees you, in the silence that follows truth. We miss it because we are running. We run so hard toward happiness that we trample the very moments where it lives. Happiness is not a future reward. It is not a finish line. It is a quiet presence, a returning, a remembering. It is not found in the things we chase, but in the parts of ourselves we learn to sit with. You cannot buy it. You cannot earn it. You cannot achieve it. You can only stop. Stop the chase. Stop the noise. Stop believing that happiness is somewhere else. Because the moment you stop, really stop, you begin to see it. In the breath, in the ordinary, in the honest, unfiltered now. And there, in that stillness, you will find something deeper than joy. You will find yourself. There is a machine, a silent, invisible engine that powers the modern world. It doesn't run on fuel or electricity. It runs on dissatisfaction. It runs on the idea that who you are is not enough, that where you are is not it, and that what you have must always be replaced with more. From the moment we open our eyes, we are taught to seek, to reach, to upgrade. From childhood, we are fed images of what life should be: perfect smiles, bright futures, happy endings. But beneath every promise is a warning. You are not there yet. And so we begin the long crawl toward an imagined paradise, step by step, grade by grade, promotion by promotion, post by post. Not because we are free, but because we are programmed. Programmed to want what we don't have. programmed to chase a mirage that keeps retreating with every step. The world does not reward presence. It rewards ambition, productivity, appearance, noise. And in this storm of demands, we learn to abandon ourselves. We become strangers to our own breath, our own body, our own truth. We live as masks, identities layered over pain, fear, and silence. Social media, advertising, education, even spiritual teachings, they all play their role. Each offers a different version of the same message. You must improve yourself. Not for your soul, not for your healing, but so you can be more acceptable, more desirable, more successful. But who benefits from your constant improvement? The system does. The one that sells you diets, therapies, affirmations, courses, and gadgets. The one that promises peace, but only delivers the next craving. The one that needs you to stay just uncomfortable enough to keep consuming. The illusion is crafted with precision. It gives you the illusion of choice, but every path leads to the same void. It lets you think you're free, but you're only allowed to move within invisible walls. The cage is vast, luxurious, and polished, but it is still a cage. You begin to measure yourself against others, their lives, their photos, their narratives. You compare your behind the scenes to their highlights. You forget that you are seeing curated illusions, and you start to believe that you are broken. So you push harder, you try to catch up, you run faster. But no matter how fast you go, the finish line moves, the bar keeps rising, and your soul grows quiet. You begin to disconnect from your instincts. You don't trust your slowness, your tiredness, your sadness. You start to treat your emotions as obstacles. Rest becomes laziness. Stillness becomes failure. Feeling becomes weakness. And in this state of fragmentation, you are easier to control. A human disconnected from their core is a perfect consumer, a perfect follower, a perfect slave. The genius of the system is not in its force. It is in its seduction. It doesn't imprison you. It convinces you to imprison yourself. You become your own warden. You self-censor. You self-punish. You become addicted to your own performance. And behind it all, the original promise remains. If you just keep going, happiness is waiting. But it never arrives. Because the machine was never built to deliver happiness. It was built to keep you chasing. But here's the truth. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not missing anything. You are simply exhausted from trying to live a life that is not yours. Exhausted from pretending, from pushing, from chasing something that was never real to begin with. There is nothing wrong with wanting a better life. But when you forget where life actually happens, in the breath, in the moment, in the honest now, then the chase becomes a trap. And the more you chase, the more distant life becomes. We are not meant to live as projects. We are meant to live as presence. We are not meant to constantly fix ourselves. We are meant to feel ourselves entirely, brutally, tenderly, truthfully. And from that raw contact with what is, something sacred begins to return, something that was never gone, only buried. You don't need to find happiness. You need to stop chasing it long enough for it to find you. It won't come in a product, or a future, or a fantasy. It will come in the breath you forgot to notice, in the tear you finally allow to fall, in the silence you used to fill with noise, in the space where nothing is demanded of you, except to be. That space is where truth lives. That space is where you begin. There is a silent expectation beneath everything. You must be happy, not just sometimes, always. It is no longer enough to simply live. Now you must glow. You must radiate fulfillment. You must prove to the world that your life is beautiful, meaningful, optimized. Anything less is failure. And so happiness, once a quiet feeling, becomes a burden, a standard, a demand. This is how it works. Society defines what happiness should look like, then tells you to achieve it. But once it becomes a standard, it becomes a prison. Now it's no longer a spontaneous joy, it's a performance, a role, a mask you are expected to wear. When you smile, even when you're breaking. When you say, "I'm fine," even though everything inside is screaming. When you hide your sadness because it makes others uncomfortable. When you post a picture and wait for approval, hoping the world will confirm that yes, you are okay. But this constant pressure to be happy creates a deeper misery because you no longer feel free to be real. You begin to judge every emotion that doesn't fit the narrative. Grief becomes something to fix. Anger becomes inappropriate. Emptiness becomes dangerous. You start to fear your own depth. And slowly, you learn to suppress it. You package yourself into something acceptable. You become your own PR agent, managing the optics of your existence. You smile, you achieve, you keep moving, all while a silent ache grows inside, unnoticed, unacknowledged. This ache is not failure. It is truth. It is the signal that something inside you remembers a life that is not performed, a life that is not curated, a life that simply is. But the trap is clever. It tells you that if you're not happy, then something is wrong with you, that you need to try harder, meditate more, manifest better, fix your energy, raise your vibration. The burden always returns to you. The system is never questioned, and so the shame grows. You begin to hide not just from the world, but from yourself. You numb, you distract, you keep scrolling, keep consuming, keep pretending, anything to avoid meeting the parts of you that were never allowed to exist in the happy version of life. This is how the trap works. It convinces you that unhappiness is a personal flaw instead of a signal from your soul. It labels suffering as weakness rather than an invitation to go deeper. It makes your emotions the enemy rather than your compass. But you cannot heal what you keep pretending isn't there. You cannot become whole while rejecting your broken pieces. You cannot find truth while playing a role. And the truth is this: you were never meant to be happy all the time. You were meant to be alive. And life is not one color. It is not linear. It is not constant elevation. It is a symphony of opposites: light and shadow, joy and sorrow, creation and collapse. To chase happiness at the expense of everything else is to become hollow, to amputate the parts of you that don't fit the image, to exile your own complexity. But happiness is not something you chase. It is something you meet when you stop running. It arrives when you become still enough to feel, not just the pleasant, not just the easy, but all of it. The raw, messy, aching aliveness of being human. And here's the paradox. The more you allow yourself to feel what is real, the more space happiness has to emerge. Not the forced smile, not the painted version, but the quiet, real joy that comes from presence, from honesty, from being deeply rooted in what is. You are not here to win life. You are here to live it. You are not here to impress others. You are here to remember yourself. And when you begin to let go of the chase, something profound begins to happen. You start to feel the weight lift. You stop needing to be more. You start to see that happiness was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be experienced, then released, like a wave, like breath. True happiness doesn't trap you. It frees you. But only if you're willing to meet it without needing it to stay. Only if you're willing to honor what comes before it. The grief, the emptiness, the chaos, the confusion. Because those are not detours, they are the way through. You were never broken for not being happy. You were simply human. And in that humanness, in that trembling, open, sacred vulnerability, something begins to return. Not perfection, not certainty, but truth. And that truth is enough. There is a silence that lives beneath all the noise, a silence we have forgotten how to hear. Beneath the thoughts, the goals, the distractions, the roles, there is a self, ancient and waiting. Not the self you constructed, not the one shaped by expectation or fear, but the one that simply is. And this self has been buried under years of pretending, chasing, performing. The more we pursue the idea of happiness defined by others, the further we drift from this inner presence. Slowly, without noticing, we lose the thread. We start to speak in voices that are not ours, believe in dreams that are not born from our soul, and live lives that feel scripted. The distance grows. We begin to exist on the surface of ourselves. Disconnection doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps in like fog. It begins when you silence your intuition one too many times. When you say yes while something inside you screams no. When you laugh at things that don't make you laugh, smile in moments that ache, perform joy when you feel nothing. And with time, the performance becomes the reality. You no longer remember what you want, you only know what you should want. You no longer feel desire, only pressure. You forget how to rest without guilt, how to cry without apology, how to exist without explaining. This is the quiet tragedy of the modern soul. We become successful in the eyes of others, but strangers in the mirror. We decorate our cages, build routines, follow systems, and forget how to feel. We mistake comfort for peace, numbness for stability, repetition for meaning. But the self, the real self, knows. It always knows. It sends signals, fatigue that sleep cannot fix, emptiness that achievement cannot fill, a hunger that food, money, sex, or praise cannot satisfy. These are not flaws. They are messages. They are the soul's way of saying, I miss you, but we don't listen. Instead, we double down on the chase. We look for new goals, new gurus, new distractions. We convince ourselves that the answer is always just out of reach. One more milestone, one more transformation, one more step. And so we keep running, faster and faster, further and further from ourselves. And what we lose is not abstract. We lose the ability to sit with ourselves in silence. We lose the depth of feeling that makes life sacred. We lose the rawness, the wildness, the trembling truth that once made us feel alive. We become shadows, efficient, polished, functional, and utterly numb. But here is the deepest sorrow. When we disconnect from ourselves, we disconnect from others. Because intimacy begins inside. You cannot love if you do not know how to stay present with your own pain. You cannot see another if you are blind to your own reflection. You cannot offer truth if you are afraid of your own. The world is full of people performing closeness. Words, smiles, gestures, rehearsed and empty. Because no one taught us how to return to ourselves first. No one told us that the journey home is not selfish. It is sacred. To reconnect with the self is not a task, it is a remembering. It begins in stillness, in the moments between obligations, in the pauses, in the choices that say, I will no longer abandon myself for the comfort of others. It begins when you stop trying to fix everything and simply ask, what is true right now? Truth is not always pretty. It is not always soft. Sometimes it burns. Sometimes it unravels everything you thought you were. But that is the beginning of healing. Not to become someone new, but to finally meet the one who's been there all along. You will know you are reconnecting when life starts to feel different, not easier, but real. You will begin to notice beauty again, not the kind that is sold, but the kind that breathes in ordinary things. The wind, the sky, a glance, a moment of silence that feels like home. And slowly, the noise fades. The pressure dissolves. You start to act not from fear, but from truth. You begin to choose with clarity. You feel things more deeply. The joy, the grief, the awe. and none of it needs to be fixed, because all of it belongs. This is not a final state. It is not a goal to be reached. It is a way of being, a lifelong conversation with your own soul, and it requires courage to sit in discomfort, to break the momentum, to stop running, to let go of the identities that once kept you safe but now keep you small. Because the cost of staying disconnected is too high. You lose time, you lose truth, you lose the only real thing you ever had, you. And you are irreplaceable. So return. Even if your voice shakes, even if your path is unclear, even if all you can do is sit in silence and breathe. Return. And from that place, your life will not become perfect. It will become yours. There is a part of you that never got the chance to speak, a part that was silenced early, buried beneath politeness, expectations, and fear. It holds all the pieces you thought were unworthy, the rage, the sadness, the chaos, the truth. This part is not broken. It is not wrong. It is your shadow, and it holds the key to everything you've been searching for. But no one taught you how to face it. The world does not reward depth. It does not honor darkness. From a young age, you learned to smile when it hurt, to hide your trembling, to bury your fire. You learned that in order to belong, you had to be good, controlled, pleasant. You traded truth for acceptance, and piece by piece, you abandoned your inner world. The shadow is what remains, not evil, not dangerous, just unseen, just unloved. It grows in silence. It gathers every moment you were told to be less, every tear you weren't allowed to cry, every scream you had to swallow, every instinct you ignored to stay safe. The shadow remembers all of it, and while you tried to forget, it never could. This is the paradox. The more you chase happiness by avoiding the shadow, the more hollow you become. Because anything built on denial is fragile. It may look perfect. It may even feel good for a while. But deep down, it is empty. Because part of you is still locked away, and that part is tired of waiting. The shadow does not knock politely. It enters through the cracks, through breakdowns, through sudden anger, through anxiety that won't leave, through sadness that seems to have no name. These are not signs that something is wrong. They are invitations. The soul's way of saying, come back to what you left behind. But most people don't know how. They try to fix the symptoms, medicate the grief, numb the fear, hide the shame. They search for light, unaware that the light they need is trapped inside the very darkness they avoid. They keep chasing the illusion, thinking they are broken, when in truth, they are just divided. Integration does not happen in the light. It begins in the dark. It begins when you sit with what scares you, when you choose to feel instead of escape, when you welcome the parts of you that were once exiled. That is the beginning of wholeness. The shadow is not here to harm you. It is here to free you, to return the pieces of your soul you had to abandon just to survive. Your fire, your voice, your boundaries, your wildness, your depth, your intuition. These are not flaws. They are your roots. But reclaiming them is not easy. It means facing discomfort, guilt, resistance. It means grieving for the child who had to hide. It means feeling everything you were taught to suppress. But in that grief, there is gold. Because once you stop running, you realize something terrifying and liberating. The parts you feared most were never your enemies. They were just misunderstood. They were just alone. And the moment you face them, truly face them, they begin to soften. They begin to speak. Not in rage, but in truth. Not in chaos, but in clarity. And you begin to see who you really are beneath all the masks. You are not just the calm. You are also the storm. You are not just the smile. You are also the scream. You are not just the light. You are also the shadow. And there is no peace without both. To live only in the light is to live half a life. It is to reject your own roots. It is to live on the surface, constantly pretending, constantly striving to maintain an image that cannot hold you. It is exhausting, and it is lonely. Because nothing hurts more than abandoning yourself. The world doesn't need more people performing happiness. It needs people who are real, people who are raw, people who are willing to walk into the dark and come out with truth in their hands. People who know that pain is not weakness, it is a portal. Your shadow holds your story, the whole story, not just the parts you show, but the parts you hide. And when you embrace it, you begin to rewrite that story, not with shame, but with power. This is the turning point. The moment you stop asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? And start asking, what is this feeling trying to show me? That is when everything begins to shift. That is when the chase ends and the return begins. You begin to speak with your real voice. You begin to make decisions from your core, not from fear. You begin to look in the mirror and recognize yourself, not because you are perfect, but because you are whole. Wholeness is not constant peace. It is not an endless light. It is the dance between both. It is knowing that you can sit in grief and still be grounded, that you can feel rage without becoming it, that you can hold space for your shadow without collapsing into shame. This is not a destination. It is a practice, a commitment, a relationship with yourself that deepens every time you choose truth over performance. Every time you choose to feel instead of flee. Every time you choose to stay. And over time, something sacred happens. You stop fearing the dark. You stop chasing the light. And you begin to live in the center, in that powerful, quiet place where you are no longer divided, where you are not seeking happiness, but embodying aliveness, where nothing is missing, nothing is wrong, and every part of you has a place. That is the real beginning. There is a moment in every life when the facade begins to crack, when all the striving, all the pretending, all the reaching collapses, not with noise, but with silence. A silence so heavy, it presses against your ribs. It is not failure. It is not the end. It is the fall that heals. The collapse feels like death, because in a way it is. The death of illusions, the death of roles you could no longer carry, the death of the version of you who survived by hiding, by pleasing, by chasing. And though it hurts, it is sacred. This fall is not punishment. It is invitation. Life pulling you inward, calling you home. Because healing never begins in victory, it begins in surrender. You sit in the ruins, unsure of who you are. The mask is gone, the noise is gone. There is only you, bare, bruised, real. And for the first time, honest. The pain is not proof that something is wrong. It is proof that something real is finally surfacing. You are no longer escaping, no longer numbing, no longer pretending. You are here, fully, painfully, beautifully here. This is where you start to breathe differently, where each inhale feels like a return, not to a dream, but to yourself. And with every breath, the fragments begin to move, not toward repair, but toward integration. You stop trying to be fixed. You start learning how to be whole, not polished, not perfect, whole. The fall strips away everything false, and what remains is true, not glamorous, not easy, but rooted, alive. You begin to hear your voice again, not the voice that performed for approval, but the voice that whispers in the dark, the voice that knows. That voice says, you never had to run. That voice says, you were already enough. That voice says, begin here. And so you do, not with force, not with plans, but with presence. You learn to walk again, slowly, deliberately, without chasing, without proving. Each step is a return, Each step is a reclamation, and with time you realize the fall didn't break you. It brought you back. Back to the ground beneath your feet. Back to the breath you forgot. Back to the life you were too busy to notice. It was never about rising higher. It was always about returning deeper. Something shifts when you stop chasing, when you no longer run toward the next goal, the next version, the next illusion of arrival. At first it feels strange, like silence after endless noise, like stillness in a body addicted to motion. But slowly, a new kind of freedom begins to take root. It is the freedom of being. Not being successful, not being impressive, not being perfect, just being, without defense, without decoration, without performance. This freedom is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout. It whispers through the cracks of ordinary life. In the quiet moment when you choose rest over hustle, in the breath you take without guilt, in the decision to speak honestly, even if your voice shakes, you begin to feel your life differently, not as something to master, but as something to experience. You stop measuring yourself against timelines. You stop believing that every emotion needs to be fixed. You stop fighting the natural rhythm of your own becoming, and in this softness, something powerful awakens. Joy, not the performative kind, but the real kind, begins to return, not as a peak moment, but as a quiet undercurrent, a tenderness toward life, toward yourself. You feel it in the way you hold your coffee, in the way you notice the sky, in the way you listen without needing to reply. Freedom is not the absence of pain. It is the absence of resistance to what is. You are no longer ashamed of your sadness. You no longer hide your fear. You don't pretend to be further along than you are. You live in the now, not as a concept, but as a felt reality. This moment, in all its imperfection, is enough. And more than that, it's sacred. You begin to relate to the world from a different place, not through comparison, but through connection. Not from fear of missing out, but from the joy of being present. You no longer need to prove your worth, because you've remembered that you are worthy by nature. You don't need permission to slow down. You don't need validation to feel whole. You don't need success to be real. You are real in the stillness, in the breath, in the truth you carry quietly. This is the kind of freedom that cannot be sold, because it's not based on acquisition. It's based on release. It comes not from having more, but from needing less. Less control, less pretending, less war with yourself. And in that empty space, life finally breathes again. Not the life others told you to chase, but the life that was always trying to meet you here. After the collapse, after the chase ends, after the illusions fall away, there is a quiet. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of presence. The world is still moving, the noise is still there, but inside, something has shifted, something has settled. You are no longer running. You are no longer reaching for the next version of yourself. You are no longer addicted to forward motion. You are simply here. And for the first time in a long time, here is enough. This quiet is unfamiliar, because for so long your nervous system was wired for urgency, for striving, for proving. To be still now feels like standing in a space you never knew existed, a space where nothing is demanded of you, a space where you are not judged, a space where you can simply be. You start to notice things differently. The way light falls across a table, the sound of your own breath, the way your shoulders begin to drop when no one is watching. There is no climax, no big reveal, just life, raw, textured, slow. And this is the paradox. The more deeply you settle into the moment, the more alive you feel, not excited, not elevated, but rooted, grounded in something ancient and real. You begin to realize that peace was never about escaping the storm. It was about finding the eye of it, that calm center where truth lives, where you are no longer split in two, the person you are and the person you pretend to be. You begin to trust your own rhythm. You stop apologizing for being quiet, for being sensitive, for needing rest. You understand that depth was never a flaw. It was a gift, a portal to a life that is not built on appearances, but anchored in essence. This quiet is where the real work begins. Not the work of fixing, but the work of allowing. Allowing your truth to be loud, allowing your boundaries to hold, allowing your softness to stay. You no longer abandon yourself to meet the world. You let the world meet you where you are. And not everyone will. That's part of it. Some will leave. Some will not understand. But the cost of abandoning yourself again is too high. You've already paid that price. You've already lived that lie. Now, it's time to stay. Stay with your heart, even when it trembles. Stay with your body, even when it aches. Stay with your voice, even when it shakes. Because this quiet is not weakness. It is power. The kind of power that doesn't need to shout. It just is. Rooted in the truth that you no longer need to seek happiness, because happiness is not something you find. It is something that emerges. In the stillness, in the honesty, in the presence you offer to your own life. It grows slowly, like moss, like trust, like love that was never loud but always there. The storm may return. Life will still bring chaos, loss, uncertainty. But now, you carry something different. Not a shield, not a plan, but an anchor, a knowing, a truth you can return to when everything else falls away. That truth is this: you are not a project, you are not a brand, you are not a product of performance. You are a living being, breathing, changing, feeling, becoming. And your life is not behind you, it's not ahead of you, it's not waiting at the top of a mountain or the end of a goal. It's here, now, in this breath. And if you can meet it, fully, bravely, quietly, you will find that what you were chasing all along was never out there. It was always this. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.